This happened to me just last night. My wife and I just finished packing some things up from our apartment. The apartment we're moving out from because the neighbor threatened my wife. Yes, it's that kind of neighborhood. We loaded everything up and drove to the gas station a few blocks over. I gassed up and went inside to grab some cigarettes for my wife, as well as a couple of drinks for us. As I walked back to my car, I was approached by a white male in his late 20s to early 30s. At first I couldn't hear what he said, but I assumed he was asking for money, as people tended to do outside of gas stations. I told him I didn't have any cash on me, which wasn't a lie. He shook his head. "Nah man, I don't need money, I want to give you money. Can I get a ride to the grocery store?" I politely declined and told him that was in the opposite direction of where I was going, which wasn't a lie either. That seemed to satisfy him, so I went to my car. I opened the door and handed my wife her drink, at which point she sternly told me to get in. I asked her what was wrong, and she once again said, "Get in, now." I sensed a bit of urgency in her voice, so I got in. As I was pulling away from the pump, I asked her again what was wrong. "I'll tell you when we're away from here, something's about to go down." Once we were on the road, she told me what happened. While I was inside, she noticed two individuals speaking outside of the gas station store. One was a black male in his late 20s, the other was the man who would approach me. When I was at the register, she noticed out of the corner of her eye that one of them was peeking into one of the cars. She was a bit unnerved, so she continued to watch him. She saw him looking into the other cars at the station too. She couldn't see exactly what he was doing, but they seemed to follow a pattern. The first guy would look inside of a car, and then look up at his friend, presumably giving a signal. The friend would then nod in acknowledgement. They did this with every car at the station. Look inside. Look at friend. Nod. Look inside. Look at friend. Nod. He then moved out of her sight, so she watched him through the rear view mirrors. He was moving behind our car now, right into the blind spot. She looked over at the other guy. Nod. This set off every red flag that wasn't already flying, so she turned to look at the man behind the car. He must have seen her move because he was out of sight when she turned around. By this time she was wondering what the fuck was taking me so long. I walk out shortly after, and she just about flips as one of them approached me. Other people had walked out before me, and I was the only person they talked to. God damn it, don't fucking talk to him, get the fuck over here now. My wife knows that I'm a nice guy, sometimes too nice for my own good, so she was genuinely worried that whatever bait he was using would cause me to bite. Luckily, I came straight to the car after that. There's no telling what their intentions were, but my wife has good intuition when it comes to these things, and she could tell they were up to no good. I'm just glad that we're safe, but it chills me to think of what would have happened if I decided to help him. To the man who wanted the ride. I don't know what your intentions were, but let's not ever meet again. I grew up in a ragged city in Connecticut in poverty, but then nearly everyone else was too, it seemed. Around 13 or 14, my mother, who had a stroke while having an aneurysm and was warned, one blow to the head could be fatal, used to take me everywhere she went. She lived off disability from my father, so she didn't work. Instead she would take me sick butt hunting at night in the downtown business district, which was ripe with half-smoked cigs. It is important to note my mother was a fiend without nicotine, and I would do everything to get her some. During the day we did the soup kitchen to where we met some nice people who were homeless or poor as well. It was at a soup kitchen we met Ray. Don't worry, he's gay, he won't try nothing. My mother's friend said during our introduction to Ray. He was a tall man, probably 6'4" or 2 or 6'3", very thin with skin that hung from his bones as if he had once been a rather large man. He wore small thick lensed glasses but spoke with a southern accent and a gentleness. Something about him was alluring and he seemed rather paternal to me. Ray and my mother, Linda, hit it off and became friends. We'd meet up at soup kitchens and soon the nightly adventures to the ashtrays in the business district stopped as he would often give my mother some money and smokes. He also fed me chips and fast food. A much appreciated break from the canned corn that would otherwise be eating. Fast forward a little. A couple months passed by and we began to trust him. He seemed genuinely excited to see us and was very kind. So much so that my mother did not hesitate to go over his house and take me along. At his house my mother would take up residence on a love's it and Ray would sit next to me. He often put his arm around me and pressed me into him. I loved this because I was young and I had a rotten tough time in school and was without friends. My family was broken so I didn't see my father. The genuine love he had for me makes me cringe now that I am older and more aware. While walking down the hallway from his apartment his hand brushed my backside. I matured early and was about as tall as my mom and half a foot smaller than him. The hallway was tight and I thought about it for a second but dismissed the caress as innocent. I knew I swung my hands like an ape whenever I moved so I could hardly fault him. Other people we knew saw us with Ray more and more. They became concerned. Grace and Matt had known Ray. They pulled my mother aside and told her that he was insane. They told her that they had gone to buy a trailer but Ray wanted it as well. They argued a bit but the couple didn't budge. The trailer they wanted burned down a couple days later. Another friend told my mother that Ray's son was a dentist and was doing well for himself but had been molested as a kid by Ray. Ray never told us he had a son. Not even a hint of it. When my mum told me this I broke down and cried but she wanted to keep it hushed. I should point out that my mother was an immoral woman. I hadn't been old enough to know what she was like before the health issues she suffered but my brother said she was always bad but afterwards became a monster. She would still see Ray and bring me around him. I broke down in class one day. I looked at my teacher who really loved me and had been there for me during some rough times. She asked if I was okay because she saw my eyes water but I burst out uncontrollably and sobbed. I could not stop thinking about him touching me and what I had heard. I know it sounds melodramatic but the uncertainty and the betrayal of my trust wounded me greatly. I don't know if I could give out the school name or not. We'll call it LMM as that is the school's initials. The teacher told the principal and guidance counselor. The GC took me into a room and sat me down. He asked me questions about Ray that I answered. He kept me alone with him in a room and would not tell me why. I found out later that they called my brother's school and my mother at the same time and interviewed them over the phone. My brother had moved into his girlfriend's house so hadn't really dealt too much with Ray but said he knew him and my mom ended up telling them about everything. The police were called and they drove me to my house as school ended and they did not want me walking home. They got to my house and told my mother that they would talk to Ray about me. They came back an hour later and told me that he could not speak to me anymore. They couldn't stop him from coming near us but he was absolutely forbidden to talk to me. It turns out they found him outside the school with money and a new bike. The money was for me because he knew I valued cash to get my mom smokes and the bike was for my brother. Ray planned to kidnap me that day. I have no doubt about it. For a few years more until I turned 16 and moved out of my house I would run into Ray while walking with my mom. He would always stare at me but talk to her. My mother would talk back with him. She never addressed what happened, never talked to me. I moved to Maine at 16 though away from them both. So to the mother who I suspect was willing to give me up for her addiction and to the stranger who slithered into my life like a snake. Let's not meet again. This happened when I was 14 or 15 years old. My school has an option. If it's too far for you to travel to school, you can always opt to stay in the hostel. You pay a certain amount monthly and on alternate weekends they'll let you off to see your parents, or go to town to hang out or get some personal supplies. So this is an all-girls school. At the hostel, we experienced change of guard a lot of times after our previous guard passed away. The late guard was a nice chap, and acted more like a grandfather to us. He's in his late 50s to early 60s, bringing us food from his wife and candies. Till one day a man in his 30s took the guard post after quite some times the hostel being without one. The new guard was a bit off. There are times when he would walk past our study room and stand by the window staring at us. Other times he'll stay outside the gate near the shower room smoking ciggies. It creeped us a little, but we didn't really do much as the wardens are also wary that we won't be able to get a new guard if they fire him. So he stays. Whenever he's around and we get uncomfortable, we will just close the door to the room we are in as so he could not peer inside. Fast forward a few months after, our panties started to go missing. We have this place right behind our hostel block that were allocated for us to hang our laundry and air it dry after we did them. Some girls will soak their clothes in softener for a night and leave the clothes, including panties, in a pail in the laundry room. The next day when we wake up, all of our panties will be missing. It went on for a few weeks and we started getting anxious about the missing panties. It comes to a point where few girls were left with only few panties with them. They had to give their parents an emergency call to buy them more and send it to the hostel. Our wardens were getting anxious too. We alerted the school and local enforcement, but not much is being done. We were mostly left on our own. One weekend 2 girls went behind the guardhouse to get some cleaning stuff. We clean up part of the hostel every alternate weekends when we don't have our outings, and notice a large garbage bag. They left it untouched at first, but when they returned to put back the brooms and mops that they use, one girl got curious to what's in the bag and decided to take a look. Inside, there were heaps of our missing panties. Both girls freaked out when they see the young guard coming towards them yelling some profanities and asked them to not touch the bag. Both ran towards the main hostel building straight to our warden's room. Our wardens were both alarmed and called the police straight away. Then, armed with a few of burly girls, who's also our school's hockey players, with their hockey sticks in tow, went to look for him. The guard managed to get away on his motorcycle. Few days later the police caught him snooping around a hostel when it was almost lights off. Turned out he has been a repeated sex offender, caught a few times being a flasher around the schools in the city. We were all relieved to have him locked away in jail, but also upset that our school has been careless in hiring guard for the hostel. Our parents demand for PTA emergency meeting and decided that the next one they hire has to go through PTA approval first. It was scary to imagine that this guy has the keys to almost all rooms in the hostel, except for the dorms, where a dorm leader is given the keys to lock the door after lights out from inside. But imagine what nasty things he would do if the 2 girls didn't discover the missing panties. After all, this man has been entrusted to guard us from harm, but he turned out to be the danger lurking around. I still have shivered down my spine when I think of him. So perverted hostel guard, let's not meet again. Thank you for watching True Scary Stories on Reddit. Remember to leave a like and subscribe for more dark stories. Have a safe day.